Hey guys, my name is Javlar and this is my first YouTube video. I thought I'd make a little guide for people who want to start flying, especially the fighters in Planetside 2. Hope you enjoy it, and please leave any comments or feedback. I am by no means an expert at this. I've only been playing for a couple of days, so as much as it's a guide, it's also just some tips and tricks I picked up. So we'll start by going into the different certifications and so on. I'll show you what I've got so far. And just a little disclaimer here, it's mostly gonna be about ground attack, not that much about actual dogfighting. It's, well, truth be told, I'm not really that good at it. I'll cover some of it, but mostly this will be a ground attack based guide. In the passive systems, I put a few points just to get a quicker spawn, and in the utility slot, I use the flares. I'll be getting an upgrade for it later, but the first one you should really get it just to have the flares against missiles. Really helps. And in the defense slot, I've tried all of them. None of them really struck me as all that great, except for composite armor. It's just a passive nice bonus. Performance-wise, I put hover stability really nice for just hovering and getting those bombing runs in. As far as weapons go, I do not use the standard Sarin laser cannon. I use the turbo lasers instead. And as I said, it's mainly a ground attack based guide, but I do find the turbo lasers work quite well versus ground targets, and you can hold your own in the air. I have the infrared optics, as you see. I'll get into that more in a bit. And now we come to the bread and butter of the ground attack for the Scythe, which is the dual photon pods. As you see, I have the maximum ammo capacity as well as the infrared, and infrared is what really makes this weapon shine, and you'll see more of it in the video. And while this is a guide tuned specifically for the Scythe and Vanu Sovereignty, it works just as well for either of the other factions. So here you see a little bit of the craft I'm using and what ammo. We already went through it, what different attachments and so on. Well, at this point you've probably had enough of the loadout screen, so we'll jump right into the action. And just for good measure, we'll start off with some air-to-air combat, just to have it out of the way. As I said, it's sort of hard, and truth be told, I'm not very good at it. What usually happens is you pounce a guy, you get some good shots in, and then they start screaming and squirming and trying to get away, and you chase them, and then they end up blowing themselves up somehow, like that guy did there, and you end up with a critical kill assist. That's usually how my air-to-air goes. But anyways, I'll throw in some tips for good measure as far as air-to-air combat goes. And of course you do need to lead them somewhat with your gunfire, so shoot where they're going, not where they are. And as far as the reticle goes, I usually tend to fire having the reticle a bit above them, especially when you're chasing them. Another tip I can throw out there is that when they're bobbing and weaving and everything, don't be afraid to reload, even though you maybe you have half your magazine left. Don't be afraid to do a manual reload, because having all those 30, maybe you have 40, whatever, depending on what your upgrade is. Having all those once you actually have a good shot is a lot better than, you know, throwing 13 shots in and then you have to reload. Another really important thing as far as air-to-air goes is of course situational awareness. Knowing where the enemy are and how many they are. Is it wise to pursue? Is it wise to get out of there? And I would say 9 times out of 10, when your gut tells you I should probably get out, you should get out. I don't know how many times I've used, maybe I can just get this last guy, and then I end up being cannon fodder for someone else. Yeah, as you see here, when you do a whole chase, catch them, and they end up blowing themselves up. And while we're waiting for the last fight here, another good tip of course is to reload and rearm and repair when you can. Play as engineers, you can always repair your plane. And as far as this goes, I've been thinking about it a bit. The afterburner seems for me, lots of times I can't get up to 220 knots, which is the standard cruising speed, unless I do use the afterburner at least once, so that might be a good tip. And to finish off the air-to-air segment, we get this little free kill here. This guy's already burning, and this is the sort of kills I get. Someone's already done all the work, they're up in the sky, and you end up getting those final shots in and getting the kill. The last thing I want to discuss before we end the air-to-air segment is the use of rockets for air-to-air. You can of course use the missiles, but truth be told they're not that damaging and most people will be getting the flares, so I would suggest always going with the photon pods. They're too damn good to pick anything else. Now let's go to the air-to-ground stuff, and we'll transition with a nice kill of a Liberator sitting parked, so it's almost a ground kill. And as you see here, I am using the full 7 salvo of the rockets, then switching to the turbo lasers while the rockets reload. And while they might not do that high amount of damage, at least you're doing something, and you're not just sitting there looking foolish waiting for your rockets to reload. And while it might be tempting to go for the infantry and so on, I tend to try at least to go for the turrets, first of all the anti-air turrets, because they're the ones making life hard on us pilots. And while it might be self-explanatory, this is what I usually do. I go in for a couple of rocket runs, maybe a burst of the lasers. Once I have to reload, if it looks alright I'll stay a bit, but if it doesn't look that good, I'll bail out and try to come back. Not what I'm doing right now, but apparently I thought it was a good idea, which it turned out to be. I do tend to get a bit more adventurous once I know that the respawn timer is up on my side, though the first couple of minutes I tend to be a bit more conservative to not have to wait down there on the ground for my side to respawn. As far as the controls go, I'm not gonna go into it that much, but or not at all actually. It's something I think you learn by doing, and the one thing I really find really nice about the VTOL and these planes is that it's very reminiscent of flying a helicopter, and that's what I would usually used to do in Battlefield 3, for example. Wasn't very good with the fighters, but I was pretty good with the chopper, and you can really get some very nice hover action and really provide good cover for your ground troops, and get a good overall view of the situation just by hovering. There's always a lot of action going on in Planetside, so it might be a little hard to find a spot to train hovering or other pilot maneuvers, but for example, you can just use your warp gate. Try to keep one of the pillars of the warp gate in the middle of your screen while you hover around it. It would be a good exercise. Due to the fact that a lot of the action in Planetside goes on at facilities, like for example one of these, you're very likely to spend a lot of your time going to that facility, unloading your weapons, and going back to reload. What I do is I use the waypoint system implemented in the game, because it can be sort of hard, especially during night and you're using your IR vision. It's sort of hard to see long distances. So I say usually your squad leader will set a squad waypoint for your objectives, so you know where to go to unleash your rounds, and then I set a personal waypoint for a friendly base that I know is well, it's not occupied with enemies, so I know where I can go back. So you can just have that little reminder to as to where to run off to if things get too hectic. As you saw right there, I approached a little hill thinking it was one turret, one guy, or maybe two, and boom, all of a sudden there's like 20-30 guys running around, and you have to be aware that the pop-up is sort of annoying, and what you really have to be aware of, I didn't notice this until just recently, that you can't hit what you can't see, basically. So even though you know there's guys down there, you can't hit them. You have to be able to see them. You can unleash all the rockets you want, but you're not going to do any damage unless you actually see them. One thing that might be self-explanatory, at least to battlefield people, is that you should always use the spot ability. It's the default bind is Q. I suggest you use it all the time. Not only is it useful for your team because they get your targets and they can maybe clean up what you missed, but it's also very beneficial for you, your own sake. I often find it sort of hard to distinguish between a friendly and an enemy. But by spotting you get a nice little extra help. It's calling out enemy light assault spotted or whatever. And right up in here I'm not quite sure if he's dead or if whatever it is, so I use the spot and that's one less enemy infiltrator. And since lots of people tend to leave their vehicles unattended, it's really nice to spot to be able to distinguish between an enemy and a friendly, so you know if you're destroying an enemy sounder or a friendly one. And as I said, I use the flares, which are quite useful. Remember, there's only a 40-second cooldown. So here I use the first, use them, and there's a 40-second cooldown now until I can use them again. A direct hit from one of the missiles fired from either other aircrafts or from the ground reduce your health to 50%, so there's no problem taking a hit, but you should try to avoid it. And as you see here, I get locked up and no longer have the flare, but you can do like in the movies and make the missiles fly into a mountain or something if you try some fancy maneuvers. Some people might have some something to say about me just ground and pounding here without doing anything about the enemy aircraft, but at this point at least it seems to be the other two factions fighting each other as well, so I'm just racking up the kills instead. And as I said before, and you see it already, the turbo laser is quite nice for ground and pound as well, even though it's specified by the game as an anti-air gun. So to round things off, if you're thinking about what attachments or what weapons and so on to get in what order, while it is of course personal choice, my recommendations would be that depending on how you plan to obtain them, if you're using station cache, just go for the weapons directly. Otherwise I would say go for the photon pods first, get the night vision for the photon pods, then get the turbo lasers, and as soon as you can really get the infrared for the turbo lasers as well. And the reason for this is that it can be quite confusing if you have different optics for your weapons. You're starting off with rockets and you want to finish off an infantry with your turbo lasers, and you're going from infrared to a zoom, for example. It's really confusing. You will probably not be able to finish that off. It's a very seamless transition if you have the same optics on both weapons. And as soon as you have the photon pods, you're gonna want to get at least the cheap ammo upgrades, because of course the more ammo you have, the longer you can stay on target and don't have to miss any of those kills. After that, get hover stability, at least one, probably two. You're gonna want to get all of them. Then get the flare so you can avoid those missiles, and then maximize the ammo capacity for your photon pods. Start working towards reload timers perhaps for the photon pods, and magazine capacity is quite nice for the turbo lasers. You can shoot longer without reloading. The last tip I'm going to leave you with is stick to one continent, at least to begin with. Learning that continent and learning the map layout inside and out is really quite essential when it comes down to maybe getting out of a tight situation, knowing where to go to escape a dogfight or where to go to make an emergency repair. It's can make a whole lot of difference. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something. Maybe you picked up something good that I do. Maybe you picked up something that I do bad. I am, as I said, by no means an expert. So if you have any tips or anything like that, please leave a comment and I'll get back to you that way. If you want to play with me, my nickname is Javelar. I play for the Vanu Sovereignty on the European server Mallory. So maybe I'll see you Planetside. Take care, guys. Bye bye. Oh, seriously? You think you're getting away? Seriously? No missiles? Oh, die, 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 die! Run into it! Good boy.